Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Wife stole from our savings to pay hotel receipt, then blamed me for killing the marriage. What started as a quiet Sunday unraveled into a full-blown betrayal, one hidden receipt, one secret affair, and a storm of lies. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. Instead, I planned the perfect revenge served ice cold, right in front of everyone. This is the story of how I exposed everything, one drink at a time. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I never thought doing laundry would end my marriage, but that's exactly what happened. It was a Sunday morning in late October, the kind of gray, drizzly Cleveland day that seeps into your bones and makes you want to stay in bed. The air smelled of damp leaves and impending winter. I was in our small laundry room, sorting whites from darks, a mundane ritual in the quiet rhythm of our life together. Stephanie was still asleep upstairs, her breathing a soft, familiar sound I'd woken up to for 5 years. As I emptied the pockets of her wool coat, a charcoal gray one I'd bought her last Christmas, my fingers brushed against something stiff. It wasn't a crumpled tissue or a grocery list. It was a folded piece of heavy cardstock. I pulled it out. The logo was elegant, a stylized orchid in deep crimson, embossed above the words, "The Crimson Orchid Hotel." My heart gave a single hard thump against my ribs. We'd never been to the Crimson Orchid. It was a boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place you see in magazines where rooms started at $300 a night. We were a bartender and a waitress, saving for a down payment on a house. We didn't do boutique hotels. I unfolded it. Inside was a bill for one deluxe king room. My eyes scanned for the date, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Tuesday, October 24th. Last Tuesday, the night she had texted me from work. "Hey, babe, it's insane here, swamped. Gonna be a super late one, don't wait up for me. Love you." I sank to the cold linoleum floor, the scent of bleach and fabric softener suddenly making me nauseous. I read the receipt again and again, as if the words might change. The charge was paid in cash. No digital trail. Smart. Cold. A shiver, completely unrelated to the autumn chill, ran down my spine. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the receipt clutched in my hand, the paper growing damp from my sweat. I thought about our life. The easy laughter, the inside jokes, the way she'd sneak behind the bar at my work to steal a kiss when my manager Jill wasn't looking. Was it all a lie? Every single memory now felt tainted like a photograph slowly developing a stain. I waited until I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She came into the kitchen, yawning, her hair a messy halo around her head. She was wearing my old Ohio State t-shirt, the one that was way too big for her. She looked beautiful. She looked like my wife. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, her voice husky with sleep as she opened the fridge. "Pancakes?" I couldn't speak. I walked into the kitchen and stood in front of her. My face must have been a mask of stone because her smile faltered. "Charlie? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't say a word. I just opened my hand and held out the receipt. I watched her eyes. For a fraction of a second I saw it. Pure, undiluted panic. A flicker of a trapped animal. Then it was gone, smothered by a performance that deserved a goddamn award. She laughed. It was a brittle, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh my God," she said, taking the receipt from my hand, her own hand perfectly steady. "Is this what this is about? Honey, this is Natalie's." She shook her head, a look of amused exasperation on her face. "She borrowed my coat last week, remember? When her car was in the shop. She must have left this in the pocket. Her and that new guy she's seeing. You know how they are, spontaneous." She even rolled her eyes, a perfect little touch of authenticity. But it was too good, too smooth, too fast. A real person, an innocent person would have been confused. They would have asked, "What is this? Where did you find it?" They wouldn't have had a fully formed alibi complete with a backstory ready to go in under 3 seconds. The perfection of the lie was what exposed it. It was like a rehearsed line in a play. And in that moment, Staring at the woman I loved as she sold me a story with a smile, I knew my marriage was a lie. I just didn't know how deep the rot went. The apartment became a stage. For the next few days, we performed the play of a happy marriage, but the script was hollow. The air was thick with unspoken words, a tension so palpable you could almost see it shimmering between us. We'd talk about work, about the weather, about what to have for dinner. Every conversation was a minefield of trivialities, a carefully constructed wall to keep us from talking about the one thing that mattered, the crimson orchid. I started noticing things, small things, but they were like cracks spreading across a frozen lake. Her phone, for instance. Stephanie used to be careless with it, leaving it on the kitchen counter, the coffee table, wherever. Now it was like a third limb permanently attached to her. When she set it down, it was always screen down, a simple, defensive posture that screamed, "Nothing to see here." One evening we were on the couch, watching some dumb reality TV show. A blue light pulsed from her phone on the end table. I glanced over. A text notification had popped up on the lock screen. The contact name was innocuous, New Project. But the message preview was just 2 words, Missing You. Before I could even process it, her hand darted out and snatched the phone, her movements sharp and quick. She unlocked it, her back angled slightly away from me. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as she typed. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice level, casual. "Oh, just my new manager," she said without looking up from the screen. "Has really into the new menu launch. Super friendly?" Friendly. That word again. It was becoming her go-to explanation for everything. The word felt like sandpaper in my ears. I didn't say anything else. I just stared at the flickering images on the TV, but I wasn't seeing them. In my mind, I was seeing that text. Missing you. Managers don't miss you. Projects don't miss you. Lovers miss you. Sleep became a stranger. I'd lie awake for hours, listening to the steady, even rhythm of Stephanie's breathing beside me. It used to be a comfort. Now it was the sound of a stranger in my bed. It'd stare at her sleeping form, the curve of her back, the way her hair fanned out on the pillow, and a storm of questions would rage in my head. Who are you? Who is he? When you close your eyes, who do you see? The intimacy between us evaporated. It wasn't a conscious decision, it just died. There were no more spontaneous kisses, no more casual touches as we passed in the hallway. When we got into bed, a physical space opened up between us, a no-man's land charged with suspicion and resentment. It felt wider and deeper than the Grand Canyon. I was living with a ghost of the woman I married, and the worst part was, she was pretending like nothing had changed. She'd wake up, kiss my cheek, and ask if I wanted coffee, as if the foundation of our world hadn't just cracked beneath our feet. This wasn't just a lie anymore. It was a campaign of psychological warfare, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't sit still. The 4 walls of our apartment started to feel like a prison, the silence a constant accusation. I had to do something, anything, to feel like I wasn't just passively waiting for my life to fall apart. On Wednesday, I told Stephanie I was meeting some old friends from my hometown for a beer. It was a lie. I felt a bitter irony in that I was now lying to her about my quest to uncover her lies. I drove downtown. The sky was the color of wet concrete, a perfect match for my mood. I found myself on the street facing the Crimson Orchid. I just parked there, across from the polished brass doors and the discreet, elegant sign. I watched people come and go, a couple in their 50s laughing, a businessman with a briefcase, a young woman who looked like a tourist. I tried to picture Stephanie walking through those doors. What was she wearing? Was she smiling? Was she holding his hand? The images in my head were vivid and brutal, each one a fresh twist of the knife. The pain was so physical, I had to grip the steering wheel to keep my hands from shaking. I went home feeling more lost than before. The next day, I decided to call the one person who could either confirm my fears or expose Stephanie's lie, Natalie. I waited until I was on my break at the bar, the familiar noise of clinking glasses and low chatter a strange backdrop for the call I was about to make. She answered on the second ring, her voice syrupy sweet. "Charlie, hey, what's up? Hey, Nat, sorry to bother you, I wanted to apologize," I started, my own voice sounding foreign to me. "Apologize? For what, sweetie?" For being weird about that hotel receipt. Stephanie told me it was yours. I've just been stressed lately, you know, feeling a little paranoid. It was a gamble, pretending to accept the story, hoping she'd slip up. She didn't. Her response was immediate and smooth. Oh, Charlie, don't even worry about it. God, I'm the one who should be sorry leaving my stuff in her coat like that. Things with this new guy are just a little crazy, you know? She let out a little conspiratorial giggle. I didn't want to go into details in front of Steph, but yeah, it was me. You're not paranoid. You're just a good husband looking out for his wife. The words were meant to be reassuring, but they felt like poison. A good husband. The condescension was suffocating. She was patting me on the head while helping my wife stab me in the back. The conversation was a masterpiece of deception. She confirmed every part of Stephanie's story, her tone dripping with a false, pitying sincerity. I hung up the phone, a cold, hard certainty settling in my chest. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a single, panicked lie. This was a system, a carefully constructed narrative, a conspiracy between the two women I had trusted most in the world. They had their story straight. They had their alibis. They were a team, and I was the enemy. The pressure had been building all week, a low-pressure system in our apartment promising a storm. By Friday evening, it finally broke. I couldn't stand the performance anymore. The fake smiles, the hollow, "How was your day?" inquiries. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, humming along to the radio. The domesticity of it all, the sheer normalcy, was what pushed me over the edge. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat. ID turned the radio off. She turned around, a knife in her hand, a questioning look on her face. "Okay, about what?" "I don't believe you, Stephanie." "Believe me about what?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. She was already on the defensive. "About the receipt. About Natalie. About any of it." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of sleeping with someone. I just laid out the facts as I saw them. I spoke to Natalie. Her story was a perfect match to yours. Too perfect. It felt rehearsed. You're lying to me, both of you. And I want to know why. I had expected denial, maybe even anger. I wasn't prepared for the switch to flip so completely. She didn't try to defend the lie. She attacked the accuser, me. Her face crumpled, and tears welled up in her eyes. It was instantaneous. "I cannot believe you," she choked out, slamming the knife down on the cutting board. "I cannot believe you went behind my back and interrogated my best friend. What is wrong with you?" The volume of her voice escalated with every word. "You're turning into this paranoid, controlling person. You're the one who's killing this marriage, Charlie. Your suspicion. Your lack of trust." She was a whirlwind of righteous indignation. She made me the villain. I was the one who had broken a sacred trust by, ironically, not trusting her. The gaslighting was so intense, so masterful, that for a fleeting second I almost doubted myself. But the image of that receipt, the crimson orchid, was burned into my mind. "I'm not the one lying, Stephanie," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That was it. She let out a sob and ran from the kitchen. I heard drawers opening and closing in the bedroom. A few minutes later, she emerged, pulling a small suitcase behind her, her face streaked with tears. It was a perfect, tragic performance. "I can't be here," she whispered, her voice thick with manufactured pain. "I can't be in a house where I'm treated like a criminal. I need space." She walked to the door, her hand on the knob. "I'm going to Natalie's. I'll stay there until you remember how to be a husband and not an interrogator." She didn't wait for a reply. The door opened and closed with a final devastating click. I stood there, alone in the sudden, crushing silence of the apartment. The chopped vegetables sat on the counter, a sad, colorful mockery of the dinner we would never eat. The silence she left behind was louder and more terrifying than any of her screams. The storm had passed, but it had taken my entire world with it. The days after Stephanie left were a blur of cold fury and methodical action. The grief was still there, a heavy, suffocating blanket I'd pull over myself in the dead of night. But during the day, I had a new purpose. I wasn't just a heartbroken husband anymore. I was an investigator. The pain needed an outlet, a direction, and I poured all of it into the hunt for the truth. It was the only thing that kept me from shattering into a million pieces. I started where the real secrets are always kept, the money. I poured myself a strong cup of coffee, the steam fogging up the kitchen window that looked out onto the gray, lifeless Cleveland street. I sat at our small dining table, opened my laptop, and logged into our joint bank account. For 5 years, I'd barely looked at it. We had a system. Our paychecks went in, the bills came out, and what was left over was for savings. It was built on trust, a trust that now felt laughably naive. I set the date range for the last 6 months and started scrolling. At first, it all looked normal. Rent, utilities, car payment, groceries. But then I started looking at the credit card statements linked to the account, and that's when I saw it. It was a small recurring charge, $87.50, sometimes $110. It appeared every other week, almost always on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. The merchant name was The Alibi Room. I'd never heard of it. I Googled it. It was a slick, upscale bar in the warehouse district, the kind of place where guys in expensive suits made deals and celebrated commissions. It was not our kind of place. Stephanie hated bars like that. She always said they were full of arrogant phonies. Or so she'd told me. The charge itself was like a breadcrumb. I followed the trail back month after month. It was consistent, a pattern. And then I cross-referenced it with our checking account. On the same days, or the day before, those charges appeared. There was another transaction, a cash withdrawal, always from an ATM near her work, always for exactly $200. I leaned back in my chair, the coffee completely forgotten. My mind was working like a machine, cold and logical. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that made me feel physically ill. The cash was for the hotel. The Crimson Orchid was a cash-only transaction on the receipt, clean, untraceable. The charges at the Alibi Room. That was where they met. That was their spot. This wasn't a one-time fling. This was a routine, an established, well-funded secret life she was living right under my nose. I felt a surge of something other than sadness. It was rage, a pure, clean rage. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was stealing from us, from our future. The down payment for the house we'd dreamed of, the life we were supposed to be building, she was siphoning it off, $200 at a time, to fund her affair. The betrayal was no longer just an emotional wound. It was a line item on a bank statement, tangible, quantifiable, and it made my next step crystal clear. I needed to go to the Alibi Room. I needed to see his world, and I needed to find out who the hell I had been paying for. The Alibi Room was a world away from the comfortable, lived-in feel of my own bar. The moment I walked in, I felt like an imposter. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and a faint, cloying scent of cherry wood polish. Low, electronic music pulsed from hidden speakers, a stark contrast to the classic rock and blues I played at my place. The lighting was dim, designed to make everyone look better, richer, more mysterious. It was a room built for secrets. I had changed out of my usual jeans and hoodie. I wore a dark button-down shirt and slacks, trying to blend in. I took a seat at the far end of the long, polished bar and ordered a bottle of beer, something simple. From my vantage point, I had a clear view of the entire room. It was filled with men in tailored suits and women in tight dresses, their laughter a little too loud, their smiles a little too bright. This was a place for predators and their prey. I went back 3 nights in a row. The first night I just watched. I learned the rhythm of the place, the way the bartender nodded to the regulars, the way groups formed and dissolved. The second night, I started listening. The conversations around me were all about deals, stocks, and conquests. Not just business conquests, either. It was on the third night, a Thursday, that I heard his name. A group of 4 salesmen, flush with success from a big sale, were celebrating at a table near the bar. They were loud, obnoxious, and drunk. "To Victor!" one of them shouted, raising his glass of scotch. "The king of prestige motors! I swear the man could sell a convertible in a Cleveland blizzard." They all laughed. "It's not just cars he sells," another one slurred, winking. "Did you hear about the redhead from corporate last month? He had her crying in her cubicle by Wednesday." "The man's a legend," the first one agreed. "A goddamn force of nature. Victor Stone." The name hit me like a physical blow. Prestige Motors was a high-end car dealership just a few blocks from Stephanie's restaurant. The geography was right. The timeline was right. The arrogance was right. I kept my face neutral, taking a slow sip of my beer, but inside my heart was hammering against my ribs. I had a name. The shadow that had been haunting me for weeks finally had a name. He wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was a man, a legend at the Alibi Room, a king at Prestige Motors. And as I sat there, invisible in the corner of his kingdom, I made a promise to myself. I was going to find out everything about this king, and then I was going to watch his kingdom burn. The next day, I became a different person. I wasn't Charlie the husband or Charlie the bartender anymore. I was a hunter. My prey was Victor Stone. I drove to Prestige Motors in my 10-year-old Honda, a piece of junk compared to the gleaming rows of Audis and BMWs lining the lot. The showroom was all glass and chrome, sterile and intimidating. I walked in, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm. A young salesman in a suit that was a size too big immediately approached me. "Can I help you, sir?" "I am looking for Victor Stone," I said, my voice steady. "A friend of mine bought a car from him, said he was the best." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. The young salesman's face lit up with a look of hero worship. "Oh, Vic? Yeah, he's the man. Let me see if he's free." A minute later, he emerged from an office in the back. Victor Stone. He was even more impressive in person than the story suggested. He was tall, with thick, dark hair swept back from his forehead. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, no tie, the top 2 buttons of his crisp white shirt undone. He moved with an easy, athletic grace, and his smile was the main event. It was wide, confident, and utterly predatory. It was a weapon. "Hey there," he said, extending a hand. His handshake was firm, confident. "Victor, what can I get you into today?" The casual intimacy of the question made my skin crawl. I mumbled something about looking at a used 3 Series. For the next 20 minutes, I let him perform. He was a master. He leaned against the car, talking about torque and horsepower, but his real product was himself. He was selling a lifestyle, a fantasy of power and success. He'd make eye contact, hold it for a second too long, drop his voice a little lower. I could see exactly how it worked. I could see how a woman, maybe a woman feeling a little bored, a little unseen in her own life, could fall for it. I tried to study him, to find some trace of Stephanie on him. Was his cologne the faint, spicy scent I had sometimes smelled on her clothes when she got home from a late night? Was the silver watch on his wrist the one she'd been secretly saving for? The thought made me sick. I made an excuse about needing to talk to my wife and got his business card. "Bring her by," he said with a wink. "He'll give her a test drive she'll never forget." The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it left me speechless. That night I followed him. From the dealership, he drove his sleek black Audi not home, but straight to the Alibi Room. He was a creature of habit. My plan was set. This was his hunting ground, and I was about to walk right into the lion's den. I gave him 10 minutes before I walked into the Alibi Room. He was already at the bar, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, holding court with the bartender. He looked completely at home, the king on his throne. I took the empty stool right next to him. He glanced over, gave me a brief, dismissive nod, and turned back to his conversation. I ordered my beer and waited. Patience was my only advantage. "Tough game last night," I said after a few minutes, gesturing to the TV above the bar, which was replaying highlights from the Cavaliers game. That's all it took. Victor loved to talk, especially about winning. We started talking basketball, which bled into talk about the city, and then about work. I told him I was a bartender at a place across town. "A fellow soldier in the service industry," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Let me buy you a real drink." He ordered us 2 shots of top-shelf whiskey. I used every trick I knew. I listened more than I talked. I laughed at his jokes. I made him feel like the most interesting man in the world. And under the warm glow of the alcohol and his own ego, he started to open up. He started to brag. He told me stories of his conquests, vague enough to be deniable, detailed enough to paint a picture. The paralegal from downtown, the wife of a dentist from the suburbs. He spoke about them like they were trophies, notches on his belt. And then he started talking about his newest one. "This one's special, though," he said, leaning in closer, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. "A real firecracker. She's a waitress, married to some schmuck bartender, can you believe it?" He shook his head and chuckled. "The thrill for her is the danger, you know, getting away with it." My blood ran cold. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, nodding along like I was impressed. She loves to dance, he continued, a smirk playing on his lips. We go out, and he'll have my hand right on her ass on the dance floor, and her husband has no idea. He's probably at home, waiting for her, thinking she's just tired from a long shift. He took a long sip of his whiskey. Her weak spot, he said, lowering his voice even further, is this little cocktail she likes. Fruity thing, called a sunset kiss. Sunset kiss. The name echoed in the suddenly silent chambers of my mind. The cocktail I had invented for Stephanie, on our 3rd anniversary. I named it that because we were watching the sunset over Lake Erie when I first made it for her. It was our drink. The confession wasn't a single sentence. It was 1,000 tiny, brutal cuts. He was describing my wife, our life, our secrets, and he was doing it with the casual, detached pride of a man describing a car he'd just sold. He drained his glass and stood up. Well, man, it was good talking to you. He pulled out his wallet to pay. Gotta run. Got a date with that little firecracker tonight, actually. He winked at me. Gotta keep the merchandise happy. He walked out of the bar, leaving me sitting there, staring at my own reflection in the dark mirror behind the bar. The man looking back at me was a stranger. His eyes were hollow, but there was a flicker of something new in them. Not sadness, not anymore. It was a cold, hard, calculating fire. The hunt was over. Now it was time to set the trap. The anger inside me had cooled. It didn't disappear. It crystallized. It transformed from a raging, chaotic fire into a single, sharp point of ice. The grief was still there, a dull ache behind my ribs, but the dominant feeling was a cold, calculated resolve. I wasn't going to have a screaming match in Natalie's living room. I wasn't going to send angry texts. My confrontation wouldn't be an emotional outburst. It would be a performance, a carefully staged play where the liars would be forced to speak their truth in the spotlight. My bar, my territory, would be the stage. I knew that Saturday night was our busiest. The place would be packed, the energy high, the perfect audience. First, I needed to make sure they'd be there. I called a friend, Mark, a guy with a voice I knew Stephanie wouldn't recognize. Hey man, I need a favor, I said, the words feeling strange and deliberate in my mouth. I need you to call Stephanie's work. She's at the Garden Grill now. Book a table for 2 for Saturday at 8 p.m. under the name Johnson. Mark, to his credit, didn't ask too many questions. You got it, Charlie? Everything okay? It will be, I said, and hung up. The next step was harder. I had to text her. I had to pretend to be the broken, apologetic husband she expected me to be. I pulled up her contact, my thumb hovering over the screen. Her picture smiled back at me, a photo from our trip to Lake Erie 2 summers ago. The hypocrisy of it made me sick. I typed out the message, each word a betrayal of my own rage. Hey, can't stop thinking about you. I miss you. I know I've been an ass. I was wrong to doubt you. Can I please come by Natalie's tomorrow night and pick you up? I want my wife back. I hit send, my heart pounding. The 3 little dots appeared almost instantly. She was waiting. Her reply came back a minute later. Oh, Charlie, I miss you too. So much, but I can't tomorrow night, honey. They scheduled me for a last-minute shift. It's a really busy night. How about Sunday? We can talk then. There it was. The final lie, the confirmation. She took the bait. She was choosing him, choosing the lie, even when offered a path back to the truth. She thought I was the fool, sitting at home, heartbroken and waiting. She had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. The board was set. The pieces were in position. All I had to do now was wait for Saturday night. Saturday night arrived with a cold November wind whipping off the lake. The bar was electric. The low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soulful sound of a blues band in the corner filled the space. For anyone else, it was just another night out in Cleveland. For me, it was Judgment Day. I stood behind the bar, my movements automatic. I poured beers, mixed cocktails, wiped down the counter. On the outside, I was just Charlie, the friendly neighborhood bartender. But on the inside, I was a coiled spring, every nerve ending buzzing with anticipation. My manager Jill knew something was up. He'd seen the look in my eye all week. I'd told him a partial truth that I expected my estranged wife to show up with the man she was cheating on me with. He just nodded grimly. Let me know what you need, Charlie. I had a young waitress, Maya, keeping an eye on the host stand. At exactly 8 o'clock, she caught my eye and gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. My heart leaped into my throat. I looked towards the entrance, and there they were. He walked in first. Victor, dressed to kill in a dark gray blazer over a black shirt. He scanned the room with an air of ownership, a smug smile on his face. He was the conquering king entering a new territory. And then she followed. Stephanie. She was wearing the red dress, the one ID bought her for her 30th birthday, the one she'd worn the night I told her I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. Seeing her in that dress, on his arm, was a special kind of cruelty. She looked beautiful, she looked happy, and she looked like a complete stranger. The hostess led them to their table, the Johnson reservation. It was a good one, a corner booth, slightly elevated, offering a great view of the band. It was also perfectly visible from my position behind the bar. I had a front row seat to the last act of my marriage. I watched them settle in. He put his hand on her back, his fingers tracing a line down her spine. She leaned in close, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. They were in their own little world, a bubble of secrets and lies, completely oblivious to the fact that their world was about to be shattered. I took a deep breath, the air tasting like whiskey and regret. I let them get comfortable. Let them order their first round. Let the curtain rise on their final performance. I watched them from a distance, my hands moving on their own, mixing a gin and tonic, pouring a pint of stout. My mind, however, was a laser, focused on that corner booth. I saw the waitress, a new girl named Chloe, approach their table. I saw them laugh and point at the menu. Chloe scribbled on her notepad and walked towards the service station right in front of me. She clipped the order onto the rail. I didn't need to look at it. I already knew what it would say. "Order up for booth 7, Charlie," she said. I glanced at the ticket. 1 draft beer, 1 sunset kiss. The name of the cocktail felt like a punch to the gut, even though I was expecting it. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was it. This was the signal. "I got this one, Chloe," I said, my voice eerily calm. I reached for the gin, the peach schnapps, the cranberry juice, the ingredients I had perfected for her. My hands were perfectly steady. I was a machine. I poured the spirits, topped it with a splash of orange juice to create that signature sunset-like gradient of color. I garnished it with an orange slice just the way she liked it. The drink was beautiful, a beautiful poisonous lie in a glass. I put the beer and the vibrant cocktail on a tray. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep, steadying breath, and stepped out from behind the bar. The short walk across the room felt like miles. The sounds of the bar faded into a dull roar in my ears. All I could see was their table. I approached from Stephanie's side. She was laughing at something Victor had said, her head tilted back, the red of her dress stark against the dark leather of the booth. I reached the table. "Sunset kiss for the lady," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their private bubble like a shard of glass. Stephanie's laughter died in her throat. She looked up, her smile freezing on her face as she saw me. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a sickly, pale mask. Her eyes widened in pure, unadulterated horror. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Victor looked from her to me, his brow furrowed in confusion. And then, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He remembered the schmuck from the bar. The bartender. "Charlie?" Stephanie finally managed to whisper, her voice a reedy thread of sound. "What? What are you doing here?" I placed the cocktail on the table in front of her with a deliberate, steady hand. "I work here, honey," I said, my voice low and even, but laced with all the cold fury I'd been holding back for weeks. "The real question is, what the hell are you doing here?" The air at our table crackled with a sudden suffocating silence. The background noise of the bar, the music, the chatter, all seemed to bend around us, drawn into the black hole of our confrontation. Several patrons at nearby tables, regulars who knew me, who knew us, had stopped their own conversations and were now watching, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Victor, ever the salesman, was the first to recover. He tried to reclaim control of the situation with his trademark arrogance. He put a possessive arm around Stephanie's shoulders and gave me a condescending smirk. "Hey, pal, listen," he started, his voice oozing false friendliness. "I think there's been a little misunderstanding here. Why don't you just head back to your station and we can all— I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound that startled even me. Misunderstanding? No, there's no misunderstanding at all, Victor. I said his name, letting it hang in the air between us. I saw his smirk falter. I know exactly who you are, and I know exactly what you've been doing with my wife. Stephanie flinched, as if I'd slapped her. She tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She just stared at me, her eyes pleading. But the time for pleading was long over. At that moment, Jill, my manager, appeared at my side. He was a big guy, a former bouncer, and his presence was formidable. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at Stephanie. "Stephanie, I think it's time for you to leave," he said, his voice low but firm. "And don't bother coming back to the Garden Grill. You're fired." Her affair wasn't just a personal matter. She had brought it into my workplace. She had crossed a line. Then he turned his gaze to Victor. "And you, sir, get out. Now." Victor looked from Jill's imposing frame to my stone-cold face. He finally realized he had lost control. The king had been dethroned. Without another word, he stood up, shot Stephanie a look of pure disgust, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. He abandoned her as easily as he had picked her up. Stephanie just sat there, utterly broken. The tears finally came, silent streams carving paths through her makeup. But they were tears of humiliation, not remorse. They held no power over me anymore. I turned my back on her, on the red dress, on the untouched Sunset Kiss cocktail sitting on the table like a tombstone for our marriage. I walked back behind the bar. The sounds of the room slowly returned to normal, but it felt different. The air had been cleared. I watched as Jill quietly signaled two of the security guys, who went over and gently, but firmly, escorted a sobbing Stephanie out the door and into the cold Cleveland night. I picked up a glass and a towel and started polishing, my movements steady. The war was over. I had won. But standing there, amidst the wreckage of my life, it didn't feel like a victory at all. The days following the explosion at the bar were strangely quiet. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a vast, hollow emptiness. The rage was still there, but it was a low, simmering ember now, not a bonfire. I filed for divorce the following Monday. The paperwork felt cold and impersonal, reducing 5 years of love, laughter, and now lies to a series of checkboxes and signatures on a legal document. I started packing Stephanie's things. I moved through our apartment like a robot, mechanically taking her clothes from the closet, her makeup from the bathroom vanity. I folded her sweaters, the ones ID bought her, the ones she'd worn on our dates. Each item was a ghost, a memory I had to exercise. It was in the back of her underwear drawer, tucked beneath a pile of lacy things I hadn't seen her wear in years, that I found it. A small, white pharmacy box. I picked it up. The label was for a powerful antibiotic, the kind used to treat. Well, the kind you don't get from a common cold. The prescription had been filled 2 months ago. A new kind of sickness washed over me, a cold dread that had nothing to do with heartbreak. It was the sickening realization that the betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was physical. It had violated the deepest, most intimate trust between us. It had potentially invaded my own body. The next day, I was sitting in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room of a downtown clinic. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. The results came back 2 days later via a phone call. The nurse's voice was professional, detached. "Mr. Miller, your test came back positive for chlamydia." I thanked her, my voice a croak, and hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, staring at nothing. Chlamydia. It was a dirty word, a consequence I had never imagined. It wasn't just that she had been with another man. It was that she had been reckless. She had known. The box of antibiotics was proof. She had known she was infected, and she had continued to share a bed with me, her husband. She had knowingly exposed me to her disease, a parting gift from her secret life. The disgust was so profound it felt like it was choking me. It was the final, ugliest layer of her betrayal. That same week, I accepted Gil's offer. I packed up my life, left the bar that held so many ghosts, and started as the new manager at Orascani, a sophisticated lounge in the Capitol International Hotel. It was a world away from my old life. The clientele was different. The cocktails were fancier. The view of the city from the panoramic windows was spectacular. It was a new beginning. But it was a beginning tainted by a secret shame, a physical reminder of Stephanie's deceit that I now had to carry with me. The antibiotics the doctor prescribed felt like a penance for a sin I didn't commit. A week into my new job at Orascani, just as I was starting to find a rhythm, he found me. Dennis, Stephanie's brother. He showed up on a Tuesday afternoon before the evening rush. He didn't come in shouting. He was worse. He was quiet. He stood at the entrance, a big guy in a worn-out Browns jacket, his shoulders slumped but his eyes burning with a controlled fire. I saw him and my stomach dropped. Dennis was fiercely protective of his sister, and he had a short fuse. I met him at the door. "Dennis, what are you doing here?" "She told me everything, Charlie," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Or her version of it anyway. Said you humiliated her. Got her fired." He took a step closer. "Then she told me about the doctor. Said you gave her something." The accusation hung in the air between us, thick and ugly. My first instinct was to get defensive, to yell. But looking at his face, I saw not just anger, but a deep, familial pain. "Before you do something you'll regret, Dennis," I said, my own voice just as quiet. "You should see this." I pulled my phone from my pocket and showed him the screenshot from the online patient portal. My test results. The date was clearly visible a week after she had left. Then I pulled up the photo I had taken of her antibiotic box. The prescription date was from 2 months prior. He stared at the screen for a long, silent minute. I could see the gears turning in his head, the narrative his sister had spun for him crumbling into dust. His shoulders sagged even further. "Who was it?" he finally asked. "His name is Victor Stone," I said. "He sells cars at Prestige Motors." I gave him the name without hesitation. Victor had brought this plague into my house. He deserved whatever was coming to him. "I'm not telling you what to do, Dennis, but I didn't do this to her. He did." And she let him. He just nodded, a single jerky motion, and turned and walked away without another word. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through the Cleveland Plain Dealer online during my break. There was a small article on the local news page. A car salesman from Prestige Motors had been brutally assaulted after a supposed test drive went wrong. The report was vague, mentioning the man had sustained significant injuries and that police were investigating a possible motive of personal revenge. The article mentioned that the victim, Victor Stone, would likely have a long and difficult recovery. It didn't say more, but I could read between the lines. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt a grim, final sense of an account being settled. A dark chapter had just been violently closed by someone else's hand. I didn't have to lift a finger. Their world fell apart on its own. About a month after the incident with Dennis, I ran into Maya, the young waitress from my old bar. We grabbed a quick coffee. She was the one who told me what happened next. "It's been a total soap opera, Charlie," she said, stirring her latte. "After you left, Stephanie was. A mess. She couldn't find another waitressing job anywhere decent. Word gets around in this business, you know." I just nodded, listening. "But the real fireworks were with Natalie," she continued, her eyes wide. "Apparently Stephanie was living with her, not paying rent because she was broke. They got into a huge fight, screaming match. Natalie kicked her out." Later that week, I saw the digital proof. I was scrolling through Facebook, a habit I was trying to quit, when I saw a post from Natalie. It was one of those passive-aggressive, vague but not vague posts. "Friendly reminder, be careful of the snakes you let into your home. Sometimes the ones you think are your friends will bite you the hardest and drain you dry." The comments below were a mix of supportive emojis and curious questions. I saw one from a mutual acquaintance. "Everything okay, Nat?" Natalie's reply was simple. "Just cleaning house." The alliance was broken. The two of them, who had conspired together, who had built a wall of lies to protect their secrets, had turned on each other the moment things got difficult. Their loyalty was as cheap and disposable as their lies. I should have felt a surge of satisfaction, a sense of, "I told you so." But I didn't. Watching their empire of deceit crumble didn't bring me joy. It was like watching a building demolition from a distance. There's a loud crash, a cloud of dust, and then nothing. Just an empty lot where something used to be. The satisfaction was hollow, fleeting. It didn't fix what they had broken. It didn't heal the wounds. It just left an even bigger silence in its wake. The final thread was severed 2 months after our public implosion. It was a Tuesday night, and I was doing inventory at Orascani. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" "You bastard." The voice was slurred, thick with alcohol and venom. It was Stephanie. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I want to know what this feels like," she spat. "To ruin someone's life. Are you happy now, Charlie? I have nothing. No job, no friends, nothing. All because of you, because of your selfish, pathetic pride." I listened to her tirade, a long, rambling monologue of blame and self-pity. She was the victim. I was the villain who had destroyed her. There was no apology, no accountability, not a shred of remorse. She had learned nothing. I let her talk until she ran out of breath, her words ending in a choked sob. The silence stretched for a moment. "Are you done?" I asked quietly. "What?" "I asked if you are done," I repeated. "Because I have one thing to say to you. I started my treatment a while ago. You should get yourself checked out too, Stephanie. For the chlamydia, assuming Victor was the only one." I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call and immediately blocked the number. I stood there in the quiet storeroom, surrounded by bottles of expensive liquor. A chapter of my life had just slammed shut with that final, brutal click. It was over, all of it. The love, the lies, the anger, the pain. I went home that night and looked at myself in the mirror. For the past few months, I had let my beard grow out, a scruffy, physical manifestation of my grief and neglect. I looked tired. I looked older. I looked like a man who had been through a war. Slowly, deliberately, I took out my razor, lathered my face with shaving cream, and began to shave. With each scrape of the blade, I felt like I was peeling away the last remnants of my old life. The face that emerged was mine, but different, sharper, warier, but clean. It was time to finally, truly, start over. Months bled into a new year. The raw, gaping wound of Stephanie's betrayal had started to scar over. It was still there, a tight, ugly mark on my soul, but it no longer wept at the slightest touch. My life at Orascani had found a steady rhythm. The bar was my sanctuary, a place of clean lines, professional smiles, and zero drama. I had become a quiet observer, a manager who saw everything. It was that learned vigilance that made me notice him. He was smooth, the kind of guy whose charm felt like a well-oiled machine. He was with a woman, and he was laying it on thick. The woman, however, didn't seem entirely sold. She was beautiful, with intelligent eyes and an air of professional composure, dressed in a sharp, dark pantsuit. Her name, ID learned later, was Josephine Vance. I was doing my rounds, checking on tables when I saw the move. It was slick, almost invisible. As Josephine looked away towards the piano player, her date palmed a tiny object and, with a swift, practiced motion, dropped it into her full wine glass. A jolt, cold and electric, shot through me. My past came rushing back, the deception, the vulnerability, the predators who move in the shadows. For a moment I was paralyzed. It wasn't my business. But then I looked at Josephine's unsuspecting face, and I saw a reflection of the person I used to be. Trusting, unaware. I acted before I could second-guess myself. I walked over to their table, a professional, apologetic smile fixed on my face. "Folks, my sincerest apologies," I said, directing my words to the man. "My new bartender just informed me he may have poured this from a bottle that was opened yesterday. It won't be up to our standards. Let me replace these for you immediately, on the house." Before he could protest, I picked up both of their glasses, hers tainted, his clean. His smile tightened, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, but he couldn't object without revealing himself. "Not a problem," he said through gritted teeth. I took the glasses straight to my office, not behind the bar. I placed Josephine's glass carefully on my desk. Then I quietly called hotel security and told them what I had witnessed. I returned to the bar, mixed 2 fresh glasses of wine myself, and had a waitress deliver them. Security was discreet. They waited until the man went to the restroom, intercepted him, and quietly escorted him out. A few minutes later, a security manager came to Josephine's table and spoke to her in low tones. I watched as her face registered shock, then a slow dawning horror followed by a steely resolve. Before she left, she walked over to the bar where I was polishing glasses. "You're the manager, Charlie?" she asked, her voice calm and steady, though I could see the faint tremor in her hands. "I am." She looked at me, her intelligent eyes searching my face. "They told me what you did, but they didn't tell me how you knew. You didn't just guess." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I stopped polishing and met her gaze. "Let's just say I've learned to recognize the signs when someone isn't what they seem," I said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with an unspoken history. And in that moment, a new conversation, one completely separate from the ghosts of my past, had begun. 2 days later, Josephine Vance walked back into Oriskany. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. She was dressed more casually this time, in dark jeans and a stylish leather jacket, but she still carried that same air of professional grace. She sat at the bar. "I'm not sure what the protocol is for thanking a man who may have saved your life," she said, her tone direct but warm. But I was thinking coffee might be a start, my treat. I was taken aback. Her confidence was disarming. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said with a small smile. "I want to. When's your break?" An hour later, we were sitting in a small coffee shop down the street. The air smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. It was the first time in over a year that I'd sat across from a woman I didn't know and felt calm. There was no agenda, no pretense. She was an architect. She talked about buildings, about the way a structure needs a solid foundation to withstand pressure, the way light and space can affect how people feel. It was fascinating. She spoke about her work with a quiet passion that was infectious. "What about you?" she asked, stirring her cappuccino. "You seem like more than just a bar manager." I hesitated, the old instinct to hide, to protect my story, kicking in. But looking at her open, curious face, I decided to offer a piece of the truth. "I was a bartender for a long time. I like a job where the rules are clear. You mix a drink, you serve it. The transaction is honest." She nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. Honest transactions are underrated. We didn't talk about our past relationships. We didn't talk about exes or heartbreak. We talked about Cleveland, about the best places for pizza, about the architecture of the old downtown buildings. It was simple, normal. For the first time since my world had shattered, I felt like a normal person having a normal conversation. When we left, she handed me her business card. "In case you ever want to talk about honest transactions again," she said with that same small smile. The card was thick and professional. Josephine Vance, AIA, Vance and Associates Architecture. There was no pretense, nothing to hide. Our foundation, I realized, was being built on something I hadn't experienced in a long time: simple, straightforward respect. Our relationship grew slowly, carefully, like one of Josephine's architectural projects. We started with coffee, then graduated to dinner. We discovered a shared love for old movies and long walks along the lakefront, even on gray, windy days. With her, I felt a sense of peace I thought I had lost forever. She was logical, steady, and kind. She knew I had been hurt. I'd told her my marriage had ended badly, but she never pried. She gave me the space to heal at my own pace. The intimacy between us was a slow burn. It wasn't the wild, chaotic passion I'd had with Stephanie. It was something deeper, quieter. It was built on late-night talks, shared laughter, and the comfortable silence of two people who were simply happy to be in the same room. For months, it was perfect. But the ghosts of the past are never truly gone. They just wait. The test came on a Sunday afternoon. We were at her place, a beautifully restored loft apartment in an old warehouse building, the brick walls and high ceilings a testament to her love for structure and history. She was excited, spreading a large blueprint across her massive wooden coffee table. "This is it," she said, her eyes shining. "The biggest project of my career so far, the new lakefront pavilion." I smiled, genuinely happy for her. "Joe, this is amazing." "It's a huge undertaking," she continued, tracing the lines on the paper with her finger. "We're partnering with a major firm out of Chicago to get it done. Their lead on the project is incredible. We actually worked together years ago. Mark is a genius with public spaces." Mark. The name was innocuous. But then she added, almost as an afterthought, "It's funny, working with him again. We used to be married." The air went out of the room. Married. Husband. The words were like a trigger. Suddenly, I wasn't in Josephine's sun-drenched loft anymore. I was back in the darkness, the cold grip of suspicion tightening around my chest. The smiling face of Victor Stone flashed in my mind. The casual deception of Stephanie. I tried to fight it. I told myself this was different. This was Josephine. She was honest. She was open. But the damage from my past was a deep, jagged scar, and it had just been ripped open. "Oh," was all I could manage to say. She noticed the shift immediately. My smile was gone, replaced by a tense, guarded expression. "Charlie, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, the word tasting like poison. That's great for you." But my tone was all wrong. It was cold, distant. For the next 2 days, I was a ghost. I answered her texts with one-word replies. I was busy when she called. I was building a wall, brick by painful brick, retreating into the miserable safety of my own distrust. The past wasn't just a memory. It was a blueprint for the future, and I was terrified I was seeing the same design all over again. She didn't let it fester. On the 3rd day, she showed up at my apartment after my shift. She didn't knock. She used the key I had given her. She found me sitting in the dark, staring out the window at the city lights. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of patience and disappointment. "We need to talk about this, Charlie." "There's nothing to talk about," I mumbled. "Don't do that," she said, her voice firm but not angry. "Don't shut me out. I know what this is about. It's about Mark. It's about the fact that he's my ex-husband." I finally looked at her. I've seen this movie before, Joe. I know how it ends." She walked over and sat in the chair across from me. She leaned forward, forcing me to meet her eyes. "No, you don't. You've seen your movie. You haven't seen ours. Let me be perfectly clear. Mark and I are friends. We are colleagues. Our romantic relationship ended years ago because we were better at designing buildings together than we were at building a life together. That's it. There is no secret. There is no hidden agenda." She took a deep breath. "I know you've been hurt. I can't even imagine how much. That pain is real, and it's a part of you, but you have a choice to make." Her eyes were locked on mine, honest and unwavering. "You can let that scar tissue define you forever. You can let Stephanie and Victor build the walls around your heart for the rest of your life. Or you can trust me. Not a blind trust, a conscious one. You can choose to believe that I am who I say I am, and that our foundation is strong enough to handle this." She laid it all out. The choice was mine. I could stay a prisoner of my past, forever haunted by the ghosts of Stephanie and Victor, or I could take a leap of faith. I could choose the woman sitting in front of me, offering me not a guarantee, but a partnership. Looking at her strength, her honesty, her unwavering belief in us, I felt the icy walls inside me begin to crack. The fear was still there, a faint tremor, but for the first time, hope was stronger. "Okay," I whispered, the word feeling monumental. "Okay." She reached across the space between us and took my hand. Her grip was warm and firm. The story doesn't end there with a perfect fade to black. There were still hard days. There were still moments of doubt, but we worked through them together. We designed our relationship with care, with honesty as our foundation and communication as our framework. A year later, Josephine and I stood on a windy plot of land overlooking the choppy gray waters of Lake Erie. It was empty, save for a few stakes in the ground. She unrolled a large blueprint on the hood of my car. On it were the plans for a small, modern house with huge windows facing the water. "What do you think?" she asked, a hopeful smile playing on her lips. I looked from the detailed lines on the paper to her face, and I saw my future. A future not free of scars, but built alongside them. A future built by design, not by default. A future built on a foundation of trust. "I think," I said, pulling her close, "it's perfect. This story isn't just about infidelity. It's about how trust, once broken, becomes a weapon." Charlie's calm, calculated response to betrayal shows that revenge doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers with precision, but it also raises a bigger question. When someone destroys your life and still plays the victim, do they deserve mercy or exposure?